So anyway, with that in mind, this is the third one, as we had said, and it's been a great effort, of which the University of Illinois Springfield has played a leading role. And so I'd like to introduce Dr. David Racine, who's Executive Director of the, and I'll get it, I wrote it down, Public Policy Leadership. That's the wrong term. If you want to explain that, you may. But Dr. Racine, thank you.
Sorry. Nobody ever gets it right. I get it wrong half the time myself. As the university know-it-all, it's biennial, for those who are still curious. Welcome. I'll be very brief. It's been the commitment of the Center for State Policy and Leadership before my time, but certainly in the time that I've been around, the last 10 years, to make the resources of the university available for doing good in the community. And one of the ways we can do that, there are lots of things we can't do, but one of the things we can do is be helpful in mustering kind of meaningful data about circumstances in Sangamon County. So it was a great opportunity a few years back when the plot was hatched. I think Ashley Kirtzinger was the director of survey research at the time at the university, to develop an every other year survey of that taps into public opinion among people in our county on issues that are generally relevant. We can't cover everything in a survey like that, but we try to cover as much ground as we possibly can, and we have a fairly large advisory board always that's helping us to construct it. So we're pleased this morning to be able to bring to you a sort of a capsule summary of the results. It's a fairly extensive survey, and Matt Case, our survey research director, when he comes up here, will be able to tell you more about the details and when the report itself is going to become available. But while I'm still up here, I want to introduce it one after the other. This has been sponsored by the Community Foundation for the Land of Lincoln, the United Way of Central Illinois, and the Center for State Policy and Leadership since the beginning. And so I'd like now to have John Stremster, for the president of the Community Foundation, come up and say a few words.
I think that's a smattering, is what they call it. It's good to be with you all here this morning. On behalf of the Community Foundation, I want to just express how pleased we are to once again be part of this great effort in the community to kind of gauge the interests of the community and their opinions on things that we feel are very important. Why the Community Foundation got involved with this is because this is information we want to know. As a funder, as a convener of groups in the community, we like to always try to keep in touch and figure out what this community really needs and wants its community to look like. So what our hope is for others in the community is really for people to kind of review these results, think about them. It's not exactly fact, people's opinions, but it does help us as decision makers, whether it be in public life, not-for-profit organizations, or in our own personal life, hopefully understand the community better and then make decisions based on those thoughts and opinions of our fellow citizens. So I think it's always appropriate that we release this citizen survey at the Citizens Club. I'm happy to know that all these people came out today to listen to this. Matt's going to do a great job. But before he gets up to the podium, I wanted to introduce the other John. Much older John. Sorry, I had to. John Kelker, really wonderful person who's been running the United Way for a very long time. Thanks, John.
In a lot of other settings, he can at least say much shorter. You know, older age comes with getting short, so I can accept that. I can accept that. Good morning. I want to extend a thank you to, we had a lot of volunteers that participated in the steering committee, and I want to extend a thank you to them. Obviously, a thank you to the time it took for us to put this together. It's something we've done the last 3 years. I want to thank the people that participated, and I hope we'll have numbers shared. I would be curious, because we've asked in the past, anyone in this room participate in this year's survey? Did anyone receive a mailer at home? We had a couple. Thank you very much. 3 at least. That's outstanding. That's outstanding. I want to start with my thanks to John Stremster and the Community Foundation for the Land of Lincoln. And if you don't know it, I've had a chance to speak to this group a couple of times. You have no idea how fortunate our community is to have your two largest philanthropic organizations have the relationship that we do. I have friends as close as Peoria, and their United Way and Foundation do not work together. John is familiar with foundations around the state. We are competitive to some degree because donors want to make changes in their community, but we have to be working together because we don't want donors confused. So it's just a side note, but every chance when John and I speak, I try and highlight that. Another big thank you to Chancellor Cook at the UIS Center for State Policy and Leadership. Without David Racine and without Matt Case, this would not happen, and I want to thank them. As an organization committed to advancing the common good, this survey provides United Way volunteers a treasure trove of data regarding the immediate needs of our community and insight into the areas of education, financial stability, and health, what we consider the building blocks for a good quality of life. The data from 2013 and 2015 surveys has helped inform our work and the strategies we are investing in to improve our community's conditions. As mentioned, United Way is most interested in the sections looking at social well-being, education, health, and the economy. However, what you'll hear is that the survey addresses elected and not elected leaders in our community. As one of those non-elected leaders, I believe the totality of the survey helps United Way do a better job in everything that we do. The survey also provides a benchmark from which we as a community can measure changes and the areas and adjust our strategies as we move forward. And because of the breadth of the survey, I believe this to be our collective gift to the community. This survey is is for the leaders. It's for organizations who use this data. We see this, and I'm sure John sees this, when social services talk about what's going on in the community. This is a tool that they use. And it's all for all of us, anyone that's interested in a snapshot of what our community is doing. This is something that is years in the making for every one of us, and we appreciate that. I want to close by thanking Bob Gray. I want to recognize his enthusiasm for getting this started. Yes, Ashley was a big part of it, but this club really was a piece to it. So I also want to thank the entire membership. I couldn't think of a better place to introduce this every year. And you'll hear Matt talk about how we're going to distribute this. But I think it's outstanding that we get to begin right here this morning. Now I have an official duty. This morning it is my pleasure to introduce Matthew Case, who will provide his insight into our 2017 Sangamon County Citizen Survey. Matthew is the interim director of the Survey Research Office at the Center for State Policy and Leadership at UIS. During 2015 and 2016, he served as the research manager. Prior to this position, he worked at the Springfield Sangamon County Planning Commission, where he was involved in strategic and comprehensive planning. He has substantial experience with survey programming, questionnaire design, and mixed modal surveys. Matthew previously worked at the Survey Research Office as a research assistant and as a focus group moderator. He currently serves as the secretary of the American Society for Public Administration, Central Illinois chapter, and is working on his doctorate in public administration at UIS. Matthew holds a BA in distinction from the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign and a master's in public administration from UIS. This morning, it's my honor to welcome Matt Case.
Okay. Well, John, thank you so much for that lofty introduction. Well, I'm Matt Case. I'm the interim director of the UIS Survey Research Office. And I want to thank everyone here for allowing me to present the results of the 2017 Sangamon County Citizen Survey. As others have said, this wouldn't be possible without the generous support of our funders as well as the input of our steering committee members. So I am especially grateful to these individuals for their support. I would also like to thank Bob Gray for his partnership with the project. The survey has been conducted 3 times, and this is the 3rd time that Bob has allowed us to present the results at the Citizens Club. Finally, I'd also like to thank Dr. Ashley Kurtzinger, the former SRO director, who we are all indebted to in terms of getting the project off the ground back in 2013. So what I'll do today is basically give you an abbreviated version of the results of the survey, which will be released in the next week on Wednesday. I'm going to reference past surveys as well, especially with respect to how things have changed over time. But I think it is important to look at the present, and as we shall see, there are many instances in which public opinion simply has not changed very much in the past 4 years. So first I'm going to discuss the history of the project and bring us up to speed on where we are now. Second, I'm going to discuss the project methodology. Essentially, I'll be talking about things like response rates and the representativeness of the sample. I'm going to make the case that there is a good reason we have done things the way we have, and that the current survey especially has findings that should generalize to the population of Sangamon County. Third, I will discuss findings from each of the sections. Here I'll look at key findings for the various sections of the survey and how things have changed over time. Though again, for many indicators, things simply have not changed much. And finally, I'm going to go over what's next for the project. So a bit about the project history. As David has mentioned, and others have as well, the idea to do a survey of Sangamon County residents has been around for a long time. And in fact, there have been many surveys which measure aspects of quality of life in Sangamon County. But these are usually conducted in various parts of Sangamon County, chiefly Springfield, and they're usually specific to some other goal. For instance, there are community surveys which are often administered to municipalities as part of the updates to their comprehensive plans. There are surveys which look at public opinion on issues such as support for tax increases for public schools, surveys that look at cost of utilities in the county. There are surveys on race relations, and so on and so forth. However, there just are not very many surveys that look generally and at Sangamon County. And so I'd like to state here that such surveys, as I've learned from looking through some of our old files at the Survey Research Office, have been carried out at least since the early 1970s, when Sangamon State University was founded. Individuals such as Dick Schultz and Barb Ferrara did a lot of work in that area, and we're indebted to them for that. But again, there just simply is no recurring cross-sectional survey that looks at all aspects of quality of life in Sangamon County. So the Sangamon County Citizen Survey was conceived in its current form to establish benchmarks and evaluate changes in residents' assessments of the quality of life in Sangamon County. The 2013 survey was overseen by former SRO Director Dr. Ashley Kurtzinger and relied upon the guidance of members of the Citizens Club of Springfield, as well as other community leaders who formed the initial steering committee. From the beginning, the decision was made to include questions identical to those found in long-running surveys, such as the General Social Survey conducted by the National Opinion Research Center at the University of Chicago, and the Behavioral Risk Factor Surveillance System, a state-run, federally developed state-administered survey which measures various health indicators at the state and county level. In 2015, the survey was conducted for a second time, this time with a focus on education. That survey found that overall views on quality of life indicators did not change significantly over the 2-year period. However, the survey found that more individuals reported having health insurance and that there were fewer reports of individuals having poor days of physical and mental health. And this was likely due to the fact that the Affordable Care Act was passed and that Illinois made the decision to expand Medicaid. And the current survey marks a change in the way the survey is administered. We moved from what's known as a dual frame random digit dial survey to a address-based sampling survey. Yeah, this is a little bit wonky here. And the reason to do that, I'll get into that in a minute, but the focus areas for the current survey are economy and infrastructure, and given the salience of the issues affecting state government at the time, questions pertaining to the Illinois state budget impasse. All right, so I'm going to ever so briefly go over the project methodology here. So the citizen survey is now administered as a mail and web based survey instead of as a telephone survey. If you look at the chart right there, you can see how response rates to landline surveys have declined over time. So perhaps the only good news is that it's bottomed out. It's now 9%. It's awful, obviously, and it might be lower for some populations as well. Okay. So a total of 746 respondents completed the survey. This was the most in the survey's history. The survey has a margin of sampling error of plus or minus 3.8 percentage points at the 95% confidence level. In layman's terms, that's quite excellent for the county, and I feel really good about being able to generalize these results. The response rate is 9.4%, not bad in today's environment, especially under the cost constraints this project works under. And when we weight the sample, it closely matches population parameters. So to get into the sections here, for the second time, the survey asked respondents whether they have considered moving out of or away from Sangamon County. And the current survey finds that 36% have considered moving away. Actually, I'm on the wrong. Whoops. Sorry, everybody. So as the chart shows here, majorities of respondents in all the surveys we've conducted say that Sangamon County is an excellent or good place to live, raise kids and work, but less say this about retiring. Results here really haven't changed much over the years. There are a few more individuals this year that say it's a good place to live, although maybe those that do not think it's a good place to live have left and are not taking the survey, so we're not 100% sure on that. Different groups of individuals experience Sangamon County quite differently as well. Those with lower incomes are, unsurprisingly, less likely than those with higher incomes to say the county is an excellent or good place to work. That makes sense. Additionally, younger respondents are less likely than older respondents to say the county is a good place to live, work, raise children, and retire. And something I really took away was that individuals that live outside of Springfield, so in any other area of Sangamon County, are a lot more likely than those living in Springfield to say the county is an excellent or good place to raise kids. So it's not really a good message for Springfield Public Schools in that regard. So on the move here. So people are leaving Sangamon County, as we're aware. The total percentage is quite low, but still we are losing residents. And this is the second time that we've asked individuals whether they've considered moving out of or away from the county. So it's 36%, which is the same number it was in 2015. It's higher for those with higher levels of education and those with lower levels of income. Also younger individuals, just absolutely much more likely to consider leaving than those who are retired, presumably. And those who are employed, especially those employed part-time, are likely to leave. And I think this really just kind of sheds some light on why people are leaving. You know, if you feel like you're not getting the economic opportunities that you need, you might be likely to leave. So you've got those with lower incomes, as well as those who are just employed part-time. All right, so education is something that the study has looked at quite a bit, and each citizen survey has found that support for tax increases to support local public schools is quite low. But respondents are more likely to favor sales tax increases than property tax increases. So if we look here, we see that, again, 12% of respondents are likely to favor a property tax. That's incredibly low. 30% are likely to favor a countywide sales tax, 26% a local sales tax. And I will say also that property tax support is low even for surveys that we've conducted. It's the lowest level we've ever seen. It's lower than other similar surveys that I've looked at in Springfield and Sangamon County. And I think one of the reasons that might be the case is just that there's a lot of talk in the state right now about a property tax freeze, and so I think the issue of increase in property tax is very salient to people right now. So in terms of healthcare, since the 2013 survey, we've really seen an increase in the percentage of individuals who report having health insurance as well as those who report having a personal doctor. Fully 96% of survey respondents report having health insurance. This is about the same or the same as in 2015 and more than in 2013. Percentage that report having a personal doctor has largely not changed. However, we do find that a significant minority report they could not see a doctor in the past 12 months because of cost. That's a question that's identical to a question asked in the behavioral risk factor surveillance system. And actually, that data, which was last collected in 2012, said that 17% reported they could not see a doctor because of cost in the last 12 months. So if those numbers hold, nothing has really changed, despite the fact that more individuals are insured and more individuals have personal doctors. And so these are other behavioral risk factor surveillance systems. That's the longest name for a survey I can think of. But at any rate, these are questions that look at one day in the past 30 days in which either your physical health was not good, your mental health was not good, or you were kept from your usual activities due to poor physical or mental health. And so if you look at the chart, in 2013, the numbers were certainly higher than they were in 2015. Whereas in 2017, things have stayed the same for physical health and for being kept from your usual activities. But in terms of mental health, 3 times as many people say that there has been one day in the past 12 months that their mental health has not been good. And I'm really puzzled by this finding, and I'd like to look into it further. And I think one of the reasons that is because very high percentages of individuals with lower income levels, so I think it's upward of 60%, are likely to report at least one day of poor physical and mental health. So these groups are kind of carrying that number upward. So the next section discusses environment. Unsurprisingly, people think the natural environment is quite important. So 90% say it's important to their own personal well-being, whereas 92% say that it is important to the well-being of the community. These are virtually identical responses. That's nothing new. People really care about the environment in Sangamon County, and there's just not a whole lot of difference between demographic groups on that either. Interesting, however, we do find that majorities are concerned both about local air quality and local water quality. John pointed out that he said, why? I don't know. I think if people spent some time in the Central Valley of California, they might have a different perspective on air quality, but as it stands right now, people are concerned. And here again, those with lower levels of income and lower levels of education are more concerned. I'm not sure if that's due to geography, but again, there seems to be that concern. And then I know that we've all looked at the Chatham water issues, which have been in the press quite a bit. So if you look at the split, 60% of people in Springfield are concerned about local water quality compared to 73% of those outside of Springfield. So the survey's asked about confidence in local leaders, and as John pointed out, we ask about unelected leaders as well as elected leaders. But this year we also asked about state elected leaders and federal elected leaders. Well, the chart here shows obviously that there is almost no confidence for state elected officials. It's less than 20%. Federal officials don't fare a whole lot better. However, majorities do report confidence in local elected officials, which seems good. In terms of trust in the media, this is something that I really found interesting just because of all the talk about fake news and everything that has been going on with that, and just the polarization of media in general. So the current survey finds that 56% of respondents trust the local news media to report the news fully, accurately, and fairly. And this is quite different for women than men, as the slide shows. So 68% of women trust the local news media, 45% of men do. However, this is quite a bit better than the 32% of individuals in a September 2016 Gallup poll who trust the national media to report the news fully, accurately, and fairly. Yeah, right. You're doing a good job. Keep it up. So some of the topical issues here, well, this one we've asked a few times, but 78% say growing downtown is important, downtown Springfield is important to the Sangamon County economy, while 7% say it is unimportant. And the remaining say it is neither important nor unimportant. I don't really like responses like that because they are essentially a non-response. So I think the takeaway is that there are about 7% of people that say that growing downtown Springfield is unimportant, which is very small. Smaller percentages say that growing downtown is important to their own personal well-being. And we asked a question on what to do with the YWCA block here in town, and there's simply no consensus on that issue really whatsoever, as you're probably not surprised about. And let's see. Other issues affecting Springfield residents, 54% say that the city should hire a planner to help develop and follow a long-term plan. Again, this really doesn't show any consensus when answers are that split. It, in some cases, means that people don't really have an opinion one way or the other. 81% support an advisory board for CWLP, just slightly lower than those in 2015. And then 60% say a second source of water is a high or medium priority, so this is Hunter Lake or Lake 2. And I looked through the archives at the Survey Research Office, and I found out that people have been doing surveys on Hunter Lake since the 1970s. So the issue is not yet resolved. Looking at employment in the county, 4% report that they're unemployed in the survey. That's consistent with previous surveys, but it's also consistent with the 3.8% that the Bureau of Labor Statistics says. So in that regard, the survey is accurate, and we have a lower rate of unemployment than the United States currently. But however, of those, a quarter consider themselves to be underemployed. We ask about employment training programs. 8% have participated in these programs. That's a very small number, but support for these programs is very high, about 92%. All right, so we've asked this question about preferred rate of growth. So this is kind of how quickly would you like to see the county grow a few times. And what you'll see, and the reason we ask this really is because the county is losing residents. It's lost residents in each of the years 2013, 2014, 2015, and 2016. However, these losses are really quite small. And these losses are typical of Illinois counties, 89 of which shrank during the period July 2015 through July 2016. So if we do ask them what is their preferred rate of growth over the next 20 years, we find that 9% say no growth, 16% say a slower rate of growth, 38% say the same rate of growth, which is actually declining growth, so I'm not sure how to interpret that. And then 38% say a faster rate of growth. And so these numbers are slightly lower than a similar question, than the responses of a similar question that we asked in the fall 2016 Economic Outlook Survey. And you'd expect that as those survey respondents were business owners. So finally, we talk about the state budget impasse in the survey. Almost 9 in 10 say that the impasse has had a negative effect on Sangamon County, on the Sangamon County economy, rather. And 44% have been personally affected by the impasse. As you can see, it's much higher for those younger than 65 that are below the typical retirement age, and just a quarter of those 65 and up report they've been affected. So when you ask people, how they've been affected, a lot of times it's just, state employees talking about, reimbursements for medical claims not being paid. There's just less work to go around. We didn't really find a lot of respondents who were laid off directly, but there were quite a few state employees who claimed that they were affected. Okay, so the final report will be available next week on the SRO website, uis.edu/survey research office, and future surveys are planned for 2019 and 2021. So thanks for having me, and we'll go forward with the Q&A.
John, pull those out so you guys are in the... Paul, let me give you a mic.
Actually, I'm just wondering about the percentage. Do you have a percentage on county versus city responses, or do you separate it in that regard?
We separate city versus those outside the city, and I don't recall offhand. I think they're pretty close in terms of responses.
More questions? This is your opportunity. Yeah, hang on.
I'd like to know how many people were sent by mail or email. You said you had about a 9% response rate, is that right? And
That's
how long
correct.
were they given to reply? And who determined, among those you mentioned, leaders, received the questionnaire?
Well, about a little bit less than 8,000 envelopes were sent out to individuals in Sangamon County. There were no emails sent out. Respondents had the opportunity to reply via the web using a link that was included on the survey questionnaire. And they had about 6 weeks to take the survey.
Who did?
What was the
How did
question?
you select the 8,000? Is that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. So it was a random selection process. We work with a vendor who looks at all the addresses in Sangamon County, and we just randomly select out of that, out of the county. It's mostly a simple random sample, but we do oversample the zip codes 62702 and 62703 because those zip codes responded at a lower rate in the past 2 surveys. Yes, Beverly.
Here you go. Hang on.
I guess I'm concerned about the percentage of people who want to leave the county. Is that high relative to other places? And as a community, what should we do or care about that number?
I have, yeah, build a wall. I have no idea. I don't know whether it's high. I mean, it was the same as it was in 2015, and we had all the mess with state government, so you'd think it would be higher. But again, I mean, there's kind of there is non-response bias, and not everyone that was sent the survey took it. And the other thing is the individuals that might have, said they were going to leave might have already left. So it's hard to say.
Well, I guess that's kind of the whole point of it all, is what do we do about these trends and how do we try to reverse them? That's, I think, my hope at least, that people will consider these responses, especially people who, I think there was a question about, do you feel you get a fair shake in this county? And the answers for that, from when I looked at the full report, were far more negative for people in lower income brackets. So that's something we need to consider. How do we have programs that can help lift people up into higher income brackets? How do we dig into that as social service agencies or public officials and say, why are people feeling that way? Employment issues, of course, probably play a lot of role in that. So I think that's the whole hope here. I think of past surveys and how the Community Foundation may have had informed some of its decisions recently. I've always loved the downtown question. We've always been located right near the old state capitol in downtown for the Community Foundation, so we see it every day. And when we created and helped establish Innovate Springfield a couple of years ago, the Downtown Business Incubator, we wanted to be downtown because of the national trends of people, and millennials especially, who want to leave more than others apparently. They want to have an urban lifestyle. So if we're going to have a place that's really geared towards startup entrepreneurs who are generally younger, we thought downtown would be wise. And I think that kind of confirmed our suspicions when we would see that trend. And here it is again this year. So things like that, I think, are really helpful for all groups in this community to think about when they're making their own decisions. But furthermore, hopefully it gives every citizen some empathy and understanding for other people. I really hated to see the results on that fair shake. I mean, we like to think in this democracy that we all get a fair shake, but apparently that's not the opinion of a lot of people, especially people who are poorer.
The one piece I might add, and I'm glad that Matt actually pointed it out, the number of individuals living in our community between the age of 18 and 34 who don't believe it's a good place to live, raise children, and work. That is the future of this community. So when we think of planning and what they'll use, there are other statistics in there about how many people ride the bus. When we have next month's meeting and we talk about millennials, maybe they're the individuals who we need to hear. What is it that makes a community more attractive? Hopefully they're safe and they're using Uber and they're using other transportation pieces, but systematically, we've got to be thinking about the 18 to 34-year-olds and not the old guys like me.
As a follow-up to the question on the response rate, since you had 9 out of 10 people not respond, is there some filtering going on among the responses that you're only getting folks that are more positive because they take the time and complete the survey, and you've got more disgruntled residents who throw it away and don't even respond? So is that low response rate kind of self-filtering the population?
Obviously, this is a question for Matt on the science side. I'd almost go the other way potentially. Are the disgruntled people the ones that say, I'm going to sit down and take that 20 minutes? So it's probably both sides, but I don't know statistically.
Yeah, as John just said, we have plenty of disgruntled respondents that take the survey. But I think it works both ways. There is a certain amount of self-selection. And we do weighting to compensate for that. So we look at income, age, education, or rather age, education, gender, and we weight those cases so that they more accurately represent the population. But yeah, I mean, even after weighting, there's still about a certain amount of non-response bias that we can't account for, and it's just something that we have to deal with when we do surveys.
Piggybacking on that question, which was good, did you, in each of the 3 times you sent out the survey, sent it out in the same month. What was the time you sent it out? We have a lot of snowbirds, summer vacations. You know, they may not get to their mail if they're out of town for the whole summer. So was the methodology, I guess my question is a couple-fold here. Did you send it out in exactly the same month every survey? And when did you send it? I'm just kind of curious because maybe that could be part of your problem too. People gone.
That's a great point. I don't remember the exact dates, but I believe it was in the spring of each year. So we do lose those. But also, we tend to get a lot of older individuals that respond anyway. So if you know, people who are retirees are away, I don't know that that would affect the representativeness of the response.
I know we'll learn a little bit more next month with the millennials, but the overall factor comes into the types of jobs and even the type of lifestyle and living, which has been promoted a lot in terms of the downtown, and even the Bowen study, which said there's a need for 400 residents to accommodate the need, and it can be there. And of course, also the importance of the downtown as the center for the core, I guess, of our city and our region, and the importance that we need to place on that, and how we can strengthen the inner core is important. And it comes a lot in terms, again, getting back to the, if you talk about millennials, whatever, it's jobs and living quality and so forth of life. And we happen to have one of the strongest, actually our major employment base is in the medical area, and can be one that we maybe need to consider in terms of all these factors, and also the lifestyle, say what's going on with Enos Park and with the downtown again, in terms of how all of this can kind of come together to help build that younger base, which is the future, as you say, John, too.
Yeah. There you go.
Hi, this question is mostly for Matt. So I was wondering how the respondents broke down by race, given that about 12% of the county is African American, and if you saw notable differences in satisfaction in that group.
Yeah, it's a great question. So in terms of the unweighted sample, so before we did any weighting to account for those differences, it was probably about 5% African American, I think, and then we weighted it up to the 12%. So that wasn't actually too bad, I think. And then, yeah, I mean, certainly we do most of our responses in terms of like non-white versus white, simply because they're just, I mean, it's a majority white county. And we do find in a lot of cases that non-white individuals have a much different and less positive experience of the county than white individuals.
So I'm interested in the section on education, and if you have factors that you dug down into on why people said excellent schools or good, so on, were there certain areas that you asked about that led them to say whether it was excellent, poor, et cetera?
Well, not really. We didn't really get into education in this survey as what we have in the past. So I was kind of intrigued by the split that we had there. It was about an equal percentage that said, you know, excellent, good, fair, poor. And I'll just have to look into that more and maybe get back to you on that one.
What is a good response rate?
Oh, I don't know that I can answer that question.
Aren't there national averages on polling?
Yes, a lot of polling firms are satisfied with about 10 to 12% now, 9%. That's pretty standard. So if you looked at that Pew chart, that kind of gave you an idea of where people are.
Have we considered using email in the future?
Yeah, so the reason that we don't use email is because when we do surveys, we have to randomly sample from units in a population. And so that's pretty easy to do with phone numbers. You just take random phone numbers. And with addresses, it's not as complicated either. You can take the list of all those addresses out there and sample from those units. However, there is no database of email addresses, so we just can't do it. We could do it with a listed sample, or we could tell everybody to go online and take the survey, but that wouldn't give us any kind of science behind the work. So we're skeptical and reluctant to do that.
Quick comment over here, but there were, what, 100 questions or so? I recall in the first survey, we did it all by phone and did interviews. Some of the interviews went an hour, and so forth. But would you talk a little bit about whether, in fact, there was around 100 questions? And in other words, this was pretty significant piece that people had to spend some time on.
Yeah, I mean, it really, it was a long survey. It was 8 pages, front and back. I mean, it was just, it was quite long. And the phone survey, I mean, that was one of the issues, was just that, as you said, you know, up to an hour, which is a really long time to ask someone to spend on the phone with somebody they don't know. But, right. Well, it might have been because of the person doing the interviewing as well, though. So we'll see. But yeah, I mean, certainly it's a long survey, and we'd like to keep it that way.
Cinda, back to your question. This year we didn't dig as deep into education, but we can, and Matt would be able to segregate what school districts they're from, which gives us some insight. And we do get a lot of narrative responses from people. It's still opinion, but it's at least something that I would think school officials are interested in. So it's still a value, though it's opinion.
In your survey, did you have any questions regarding issues of safety and crime and so on?
Yes, we had a few. So off the top of my head, I don't remember the exact figures, but we asked, for instance, about do individuals feel safe in their own home? Essentially, do individuals feel safe in their neighborhood, and when the walking alone at night in their neighborhood. And I will say, however, that the survey came up before this current rash of crime. So if you were to do the survey today, you might get a very different response to what individuals have to say.
Yeah, I was interested in, when you're talking about, did you have a bad day health-wise, and that question where you had the real uptick on the mental health indice. Are you expecting that was just statistical aberration, or is that something that correlates with race, with poverty, with age? What would you attribute to that? That kind of, which looks on in terms of graph, a pretty significant uptick. Is this, I mean, one of the things that we're looking at nationally is a real increase in stress in terms of certain segments of the population, not only about, how do millennials get a job, but, people outside the kind of tier 1 retirement snowbird kind of picture in terms of seniors. The retirement side is pretty grim in terms of what the population is looking at. So I'm just curious about, as you break that down, but the mental health one particularly.
Yeah, I mean, I think that stood out maybe more than anything else in the survey. I mean, it tripled. It went from 15% to 35%. And I looked at it several times just trying to say, okay, is this right? And it was. And the main reason is because, individuals, younger individuals, non-white individuals are just much more likely to say today, that they've had at least one day of poor mental health. I don't know if the state budget impasse and everything going on with that has something to do with it, but it's possible, certainly.
We're not going to blame it on our millennials. Don't let me say that. But when you get to read the survey, those 18 to 34, significantly higher responding that their general health or mental health in the last 30 days has been a problem. That's 18 to 34, the prime of their lives. You can't dig deep, but I have had a few weeks to look at it. You'll be interested when we get to send this to you.
Did
you guys do any sort of qualitative analysis in addition to the quantitative analysis of the results, or was it just kind of mostly the one-dimensional?
We have a few open-ended responses, open-ended questions that we asked. We asked, for individuals that had been personally affected by the state budget in the past, how they've been affected. And then we asked individuals that are considering leaving the county, why they've considered leaving. So it was mostly a quantitative study, but we do have some open-ended responses that somebody, if they wanted to, could go in and code and analyze further.
I want to circle back to the Y block. So did everybody respond to that? Do you recall the response to that question?
It broke, I think about, it broke about 50-50, but I don't recall the exact wording of the question. I think one of them was like to use it as a space for recreation, yeah. And the other one was as a space to create jobs. And it was about half and half. And then I looked at it by demographics, just to see, okay, well, is it different for younger people? And I just didn't find anything. It's really, there's nothing that, so to me, that signifies that a lot of people probably don't know.
Okay. So there wasn't any unusual, provocative kind of, oh, here's an idea?
No, nothing
Kinda
really stood out. We didn't ask an open-ended question on that. But yeah, nothing stood out to me on that one.
Last question.
Given the response about the lack of confidence in local and federal officials, was there a related question about whether these people vote in these elections?
Yes, we do ask respondents if they voted, and then we ask them if they're registered to vote, whether they voted in the most recent election, and then we ask them to name their polling place, which essentially, if they can do all three, then we say they're a voter. I didn't analyze that. I don't think we looked at that too closely, but it's something we can certainly do in the future. Yeah.
Okay. Would you explain just a little bit more on the release next week? I don't know how much exact, and how people could get, there are not going to be a lot of hard copies, but what will be available on your website, and at least roughly the comment, again, I want the audience to understand is this is a significant study. There's a lot of information in it. So I would hope you would take a look, because you can go through and get all the answers. And then one question on that, how much, there was an open-ended, right?
Yes, there were, I think, at least two, maybe three.
Okay. I know those are harder to write up, but so.
We can include those.
Yeah, update us on kind of availability, and then we'll close.
So the survey will be available on Wednesday. We'll have it on the Survey Research Office website at www.uis.edu/Survey Research Office. And
And I'd offered, and I oftentimes will put people on the spot, Bob, if we were to send a PDF to you of that, can you send it to the membership of the Citizens Club?
I can do that.
I think it's a wonderful opportunity for everyone to take as much time as they'd like to look at that.
Yeah, also, I know the Community Foundation is going to post it on our website and our Facebook, and we'll get some hard copies here at the next meeting at the Citizens Club as well. So we're going to have a number of those produced for those people who, like myself, that like to hold it.
Very good.
The old
well, please help me thank these gentlemen for joining us this morning. And we will see you in August. Thank you very much.